under circumstances when the lives of his people are in imminent danger. And we see, based on this particular reading, that that Jews were allowed to protect themselves when they were in imminent danger. So this is how, by the way, it will happen at the end of days. We talked a little bit, and I'll review the two separate punitive judgments that are described in the book of Revelation. And I'll go back to the book of, no, I'm fine. To the book of Revelation, chapter 20. And I'll switch to English. And Revelation chapter 20 speaks about the very last punishment. And it says here, now, when 1,000 years have expired, Satan will be released from his prison and will go out to deceive the nations which are in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle. Those numbers, whose numbers is as the sand of the sea. Do you see what is happening? This is actually the scene of the second resurrection. At this scene, Satan is given a second chance. And there are people, quite a few people, given a second chance. Jesus spoke about this resurrection in John chapter 5. John chapter 5, verse 28 says, "Do not marvel at this, for the hour is coming in which all who are in the graves will hear his voice," that's Jesus' voice, "and come forth. Those who have done good to the resurrection of life, and those who have done evil to the resurrection of condemnation." So we are reading in Revelation chapter 20 about the resurrection of condemnation. And this is what we're reading so far. We are reading that those who were raised from the dead after the expiration of 1,000 years, they all are gathered for battle. They are gathered for attack. That's the problem. God is very fair, because what we see, and there are many questions, people ask many questions about, what if there is somebody who never knew about Jesus? What if there is somebody who never knew about Torah? What if there is somebody who never knew about this and that? Bible is silent about what if. The only thing that Bible promises, that God will raise everyone who is willing and capable to follow God in the resurrection number 1. At the resurrection number 2, which happens after the expiration of the 1,000 years, there will be only those who will agree to go with Satan for war. This is why I'm not judging anybody. But what this second resurrection does, it illustrates the corrosive property of sin. You see, often we are not aware about what we ourselves are capable of. Very often, there are situations when we learn about ourselves, but God knows about everybody. God knows about what is everybody capable of. And so, what we see the group during the second resurrection is the people who are capable, in spite of the fact that they see themselves being resurrected, they see the holy city, and they are capable of going for war with this. We need to ask ourselves question and ask God question what we are capable of. Because all what we know doesn't say, oh, they didn't know Jesus and that's why. The only those who raised from the dead, they're the ones who, they do this. What they do? They went up on the breadth of the earth, surrounded the camp of the saints and the beloved city. See? Surrounded the camp of the saints and the beloved city. So this is their reaction when they see the New Jerusalem. They besiege it with the purpose of attacking, following the Satan. So no matter what God was trying to do, and that's why there are 2 resurrections. The second resurrection is to prove to everyone that those who were raised in the second resurrection are actually hopeless and are not interested in repentance or living in kingdom. And that's why what God has to do, the fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. This is the second death. This is the final condemnation. This is the resurrection of the nation. It ends up with the fire, which is coming down, and actually then the Satan was thrown into the lake of fire, okay? And there is the beast and the false prophets and so forth. And then there is a repetition of the scene in the final, which is the final punitive judgment. And so this is how the evil is eradicated in the lake of fire. But why? What God is doing by destroying the sinners, who are also His creation. You see? God creates righteous and sinners.
And it's a strange act.
It is a strange act, but He has to do it, because otherwise, what they're poised to do,
just keep it
to kill the saints. So God, sometimes with our action, we leave no choice for God but to destroy us, because not only with our sin are we danger to ourselves, because that's what sin does, it makes us danger to ourselves, but we're also danger to others. And unlike the imperfect system which we live in, however best country we are, there are people in this society who are danger to others. And this is what we see. What happens when a person who is danger to others is left free. That's your Sandy Hook school, that's your Florida school, that's your Columbine school, that's your Las Vegas, that's your Aurora.
Boston Marathon.
That's a little different. But you see, I just collected the specific thing. These people are danger to themselves and to others. And Boston Marathon is a little different slant, but I collected this when this mentally disturbed people, So that's the nature of sin and a sinner. And God is long patient. God is very merciful. But God's mercy and long-suffering patience cannot be everlasting, because it will be unfair, because the people who are danger to themselves and others because of their sins are out to get the people of God, and they keep cause suffering. And that's what God does. This is how and when God kills. And this is exactly why this series, we're going in the book of Revelation, but we're kind of going backwards. This is why when we go backwards to chapter 16, he pours out the bowls of his wrath. These bowls of his wrath are targeted. They are targeted to a special people. To people, as we talked, who had the mark of the beast and who worship his image. These bowls of his wrath are not the final judgments, but they're judgments against the people who has the mark of the beast and worship the image of the beast. We look further back into the book of Revelation, chapter 14, and we see a stark warning. The warning is made by the third angel. And the warning says, if anyone worships the beast and his image and receives his mark on his forehead and on his hand, he himself shall drink the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out full strength into the cup of his indignation. He shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and the presence of the Lamb. See? He shall be tormented. Well, the question is that this is not indication of the lake of fire after 1,000 years. This is a warning about what is happening, what is going to happen when God pours out the bowls of his wrath. So you see, there are two judgments. One judgment happens before the coming of Jesus. In fact, the seventh plague actually comes right before Jesus comes. So all the 6 plagues are the torments that are thrown on the people who worship the beast and have the mark on his forehead and his right hand. So, what is this forehead and right hand? What is this mark? It is interesting because it's a matter of many speculations. Yeah, people talk about some, back about 10 years ago, where there was an attempt in Russia to institute a similar system, computerized system, which would be similar to our social security numbering. And that's how we are uniquely identified. Because I did find several Alexander Bolotnikovs. Now on the Facebook, it's sometimes tricky. Somebody wrote to me a few years ago. I was absolutely sure it was one individual, but it was a totally different individual, just with the same name. So that's why the government needs our number. But when Russian government attempted to institute the system, Russian Orthodox Church opposed it because they said it's against our faith, because we believe that there will be some kind of coding and secret chips and whatever. Well, I want to show you the opposite side to the mark. Go with me to the book of Ezekiel, and that's the first time when we have the mark. This is the vision of Ezekiel, who sees the destruction of Jerusalem. The book of Ezekiel chapter 9 speaks to us the following. Then he called out in my hearing with a loud voice, saying, "Let those who have charge over the city draw near with a deadly weapon in his hand." And suddenly 6 men came from the direction of the upper gate, which faces north, each with his battle axe in his hand. One man among them was clothed with linen and had a writer's inkhorn at his side. They went in and stood beside the bronze altar. Now the glory of the God of Israel had gone up from the cherub where it had been to the threshold of the temple, and he called to the man clothed with linen, who had the writer's inkhorn at his side. And the Lord said to him, "Go throughout the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and put a mark on the foreheads of men who sigh and cry over the abominations that are done within it." You see? Do you think at this time there was any kind of social security number in chip in technology, whatever?
No.
So it was definitely on a more spiritual level rather than on any kind of technical level. And then he said to the others, Go after him through the city and kill. Do not let any your eyes spare, nor have any pity. Utterly slay old and young, maidens and little children, and women. But do not come near anyone on whom is the mark. You see? By the way, this is not the new thing. Remember a similar situation in the Bible, in the Torah? What comes to your mind? A very similar. The blood of the Lamb worked the same way. The mark on the door. So this is the way how God marks his own. But this is not some kind of code or cheap or anything else. Trust me, God knows what he does. So we don't need to worry about any kind of modern technology that is going to do this. In fact, the book of Revelation, chapter 7 gives us this detail. After these things I saw 4 angels standing in the 4 corners of the earth, holding 4 wings of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, on the sea, or on any tree. Then I saw another angel ascending from the east, having what?
The seal.
The seal of the living God. And he cried with a loud voice to 4 angels, to whom it was granted to harm the earth. See, again, there is a harm, there is a impending harm. You notice this? Egypt, impending harm, but there is a way out of harm's way through blood of the Lamb. Jerusalem, impending harm, but there is a way out of the harm's way. How? Through sighing and crying over the evils of Jerusalem, because these people are receiving the mark. You see, it's not the magic to receive the mark. Someone needs to be qualified to receive the mark of God. Okay? So here, do not harm the earth, the sea, or the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads. You see? Again, you got to be a servant of God to be sealed before the impending harm comes in. So this is God's marks. But there is apparently the mark of the beast, which people choose to take by worshiping the beast's image. So the question is why God targets those people who chose not to be not to follow him. Why God would not respect the choice of people not to serve him. Isn't the love a matter of choice? You see, when we talk about here and here, right, there is something in the Torah which deals with this. And we read about this every Shabbat. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, and with all your soul. And these words which I command you today be upon your heart. Recite them when you lie down, when you get up, and when you're on your way, Teach them to your children. Put them on here, on your right hand. Bind them on your right hand and make them a mark between your forehead. See how this is done? Well, in Orthodox Judaism, the old tradition is the phylactery. This is inside the phylactery, there's a little scroll. This little scroll has the words which I just recited to you, and so they do it literally. But this is not exactly a correct interpretation. You see, write them on your head, bind them on your hand, and between your eyes is repeated 3 times in the Torah. Particularly when it comes to remembering the Exodus. So it does something with it's more of a memory issue. This is why it's here. You got to remember it. This is not a literally you got to make a box and put it for every verse that tells you write it here and here.
Well, you spend your time thinking about all this.
Yeah.
Before you go to bed, when you wake up. Is God on your mind?
Exactly.
And then you action.
And
Yeah.
the problem with that is, how are they going to get that Torah scroll into their heart? They
Yeah,
did 2 out of 3, but they got to get the 3rd one.
that's...
You need a cardiovascular surgeon to get it in there, then, literally.
You got to make it really small, miniature. So, it's definitely a spiritual action. But the question here is, this is what's in the heart and in the minds of the people who follow God. Love your God with all your heart, with all your mind and all your soul. That's the first commandment as Jesus taught. And then also remember the Exodus. This is also important. And so apparently there is an alternative to that. There is an alternative placement of something here and something here. And God is after those who choose alternative. And the question is why? Is it fair? Is it democratic to persecute opposition? Let them have a voice. Well, let's take a look. Again, I'm here in Revelation chapter 16, verse 2, and it talks about what happens after the outpouring of the first bowl, that those who had a mark of the beast, they worship image, have this foul and loathsome swords. I'm back to chapter 14 and a warning to those who worship the beast and his image, that they will be tormented with these bowls of God's wrath. But we need to go even back. Go with me to Revelation 13. And that is where we have the source of this image and mark. It's talking about the beast. So here is this verse. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on earth to make an image of the beast who was wounded by the sword and lived. Then next thing, make the image of the beast who was wounded by the sword and lived. That's the book of Revelation, chapter 13, which has 2 beasts. So that's the second one. He was granted power to give the breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as who would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. You see? So, that beast, which is described here in Revelation 13, lives no choice. He has image, and he says those who do not worship that image have no choice but being killed. Going back to the Jewish history, this is exactly what happened to Jews in Spain. They lived in Spain for the longest period of time in their history, from about 2nd, 3rd century BC to 1492. They were offered three choices: convert to Christianity, live the country within a week period, and die. Or die. So basically, it is very unfortunate in the medieval times that those who were supposed to outpour the love of Christ instead made basically three rules for Jews who lived among them. Rule number one was, you can't live among us as you are, and that's why there were constant expulsions with confiscation of property. In 1290, Jews were expelled from England. They were expelled because they did the only profession that King himself allowed for them and actually invited them to do. Many people have stereotype of a rich Jew. This is definitely a stereotype. The reason why is this a stereotype? Because it portrays a certain individuals who became successful in money changing and money lending. It doesn't portray many more individuals who tried, didn't work out because they were killed by their own debtors, who have all kinds of powers. But Europeans knew that economy does not work without money lending. The problem with the Catholic theology was that they were treating the Torah very selectively. For whatever reason, they chose this law and misinterpreted it as and called it a usury law. And usury was not allowed to Christians. Only 30 Jews were allowed to lend money with interest. Guess what? The other professions were closed to Jews. How? Craftsmen, shoemakers, tailors, blacksmiths, all these professions, Jews could not do business outside their community because in the cities, guilds would not allow them. That's how they instituted the rule. You can't be among us the way you are. Because, hey, you're not like ourselves, you're not of Catholic faith, we won't let you do your business. Well, the second thing was, you can't live among us. Very often, a zealous bishop would arrive in a town and country, and he would instigate the king to confiscate the property of Jews and expel them. So in England, certain Jews were able to become successful in establishing the banking. Of course, those who were successful provide the jobs for those who were not in the banking sector but were in a kind of a service to these people. So the craftsmen, and so there's a certain material wealth accumulated, and then suddenly, boom, everything is confiscated, Jews are expelled. And then the third stage, you can't live. So when we read the words of Revelation chapter 13, Jews can understand that. Jews can understand that. This is the threat to those who do not worship the image of the beast. No other choice, because you will be killed. So God is not the one who initiates the destruction of the sinners. God is the one who protects his people from being killed. God is the one who protects his people from being murdered for what they believe. It is unfortunately that even though God gives a full freedom of choice to us, this is why Adam chose and Eve chose to do what they did. Nobody force-fed them this fruit of knowledge from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. They did it on their own volition, on their own choice. But unfortunately, the enemy, the Satan, does not have this kind of nicety to those who follow. It is interesting how the gang works. You can come in, but it's very risky for you to get out of the gang. So this is how God has no choice here but to exercise his lethal force. Because if he doesn't, then where is his love? To those who follow him. That wouldn't be a love at all. That would be something else. When we just allow, and somebody else who doesn't deserve it suffers from that, this is no love. This is a lip service. Our God is the God of love. God told Moses, I saw the suffering of your people, and the 10 plagues fell on Egypt. God says now, when the suffering of his people will reach a certain point, similar to what is happening here, in a sense, like to what happened to Egypt. Those who do not worship will be killed. He causes both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive the mark on their right hand and their foreheads, and no one may buy or sell except those who has the mark, or the beast, or the number of his name, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. So there's no choice. This is why God has to come up with warning. The warning comes when angel number 3 in Revelation 13 says, who worships the beast and has his mark will drink the wine of wrath. the warning is exercised or executed in chapter 16, when God commands the angels to pour out the bowls of his wrath. So this is the judgment that God exercises. David says in Psalms, "Judge me, O Lord, judge me. May those who hate me be not overcome." This is why God is judging. This is why God has to resort to lethal force. But the question remains, what is this beast? What kind of power is that? And the answer to this question will be given after our oneg and party at 7 o'clock. And now let's have a prayer. Heavenly Father, we're grateful for your word and for the assurances that you give us that you will not forsake us but protect us. Help us, Lord, to get these reassurances. Every Purim, when we read the story of your deliverance, let us look forward to your final deliverance. Amen.
Amen.